Hey guys, it's my first year doing Inktober this year. I've never done it before, so I decided to put out some process videos to show what I've learned. Before we get going, let's go over the materials I've been using. Zebra sent me a bunch of pens for Inktober. They didn't sponsor this video or anything, but they sent me some really cool Inktober materials and I liked them a lot. I've been using them since I got them, so I used them for this one too. There's a couple different pens that I've been using a lot. I've been using the blue and gray brush tip pens. The blue one is a little bit of a smaller tip, and then the gray one is a little bit of a larger tip. And then there's the Zensations technical pens that I've been using for detail work. And then the last one, that red one, is a thicker pen. I forgot to record my other materials earlier, but here they are. There's a couple different types of ink. The black Sumi ink, which I've been using a lot for washes, and then the Winsor & Newton ink that I've been using more for fine detail work. Then these are the brushes that I've been using. They're mostly the Utrecht brushes. And then one Isabe brush that I've been using for scratchy details. And then for whites, I've been using the Dr. Martens Bleed Proof White with a brush, and then the Signo Uni-ball pens. So I started out with a sketch that I actually did digitally, and I printed it out using my printer, and then I'm going to be using this Huion, I think that's how you pronounce it, light box. And I'm using Bristol, Canson smooth Bristol paper, and I'm gonna put the Bristol paper on top of the sketch on the light box, and then when I turn the light box on, I'll be able to see the sketch through, and this is how I've been keeping my drawings really clean. So I'm coming in with the blue brush tip pen, and I'm just starting to line. I try to think a lot about the marks that I make before I put them down, because, you know, ink is permanent and all that, and especially as a digital artist, where I'm used to having Control Z, I've found that it's been really helpful for me to stop and think for a second before I do each thing. Before I started on any actual Inktober drawings, I did a bunch of practice where I was just following along, doing big curves and straights and trying to trace over big swooping marks that I made with pencil. And I did this because it takes a certain kind of muscle memory a lot of the time to get your lines looking how you want them to get both kind of the thick to thin and to get those really natural looking smooth curves. So if you're having trouble with that, then I recommend taking a piece of paper and drawing a bunch of curves and straights and using some guides, like using something round and then maybe a ruler to draw your guides in, and then just trying to draw on top with your brush or your pen or whatever you're using to ink, and try to mimic the guides that you've set up and get your lines looking smooth and looking thick to thin, getting that kind of variation in the edge that you sometimes want. Sometimes you have to kind of turn the pen a certain way in the middle of doing a line in order to get the thick to thin. So that was something that I practiced that helped me a lot, so hopefully that will help you too. You can see that on the tail here, I'm coming in and I'm actually sketching in some kind of hair lines right alongside my larger swooshy lines in order to try to kind of show the texture. So I've been doing that. I've been kind of interspersing some of my longer lines with smaller, more textured lines to try to show the material that I'm drawing. I'm using one of the technical pens. I think I'm using a 0.2 in order to draw in these plant details. And I find it easier to use the technical pens to draw little details like that because I don't have to worry so much about accidentally pressing down too hard and getting a thicker line. So I'm done with the light box now, and I'm coming in with the blue brush pen again to draw in the leaves because this is one of my kind of plant nature animals. So they're covered in leaves and they've got leaves sprouting all over. I've had a lot of fun drawing these weird nature creatures. The main thing that I'm thinking about when I'm at this stage is where I want my contrast and where I want my blacks. Because, you know, ink's black, so the crux of these drawings often is where those deep blacks are. Next, I'm gonna start mixing up some gray for my washes. So I actually just take some water, and my water is pretty dirty already at this point. It's got a lot of ink in it, but that's okay because I'm just using it to make washes. So I'm mixing up some water with ink to make the gray the tone that I want. And then I'm coming in with a brush, and I'm using, most of the time I've been using my size 6 brush. It's a round brush, and it's a faux sable brush. And I've been using that brush mostly to do all of my washes. I find that it's a really nice size. I can get a lot of variation because I can use the tip to get really fine details, and then I can turn it on its side in the same stroke in order to kind of get that washy end to disappear. I'm using the same tone that I just mixed up to also do the mask on the face, and then to start painting in some shadows underneath the mushrooms. With washes, the most important thing that I discovered is to not let it dry until you're done working on the area that you are washing, because if you let it dry, then even if you go on top of it with the same exact tone that you already mixed up, you'll get a little hard edge. And sometimes the hard edges can be really cool. Like you can see up there, I'm using the different levels of wash in order to create depth. But sometimes you don't want it. Like if you want a whole area to be the same smooth tone, then you want to just keep it wet the whole time that you're applying the wash and not let it dry. Because once it dries with ink, that's pretty much it. So while I'm adding the washes, I'm thinking about what areas I want to leave white and which I want to make darker in order to bring focus to the areas that are important in the piece. So in this, it's the face and the plants. And then also to make sure there's separation between different parts of the body. So for example, the back front leg, the one that's farther, I'm making darker. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm coming in with this brush that is actually kind of ruined. So I'm kind of demoing it there. It got glue on it a while back, a couple years ago. And so the bristles are totally frayed, and it can't really be used as a regular brush, but it's perfect for doing scratchy little hair details. So if you ruin a brush, it can still totally be useful. And you've been using this brush like constantly, like almost in every single piece, because I can get this really unique scratchy texture. And I might make a whole video about using different brushes and different levels of fray in order to get different textures, but you can see that I'm just getting some ink on it, and then I'm actually wiping off a lot of the ink on a paper towel, so there's only just a little bit, enough to just kind of brush on the faintest amount, and I'm building it up that way. And it gives it a really nice grain, and I think it's just a really cool effect, and it looks really different than the smooth washes, so it's another thing that allows me to kind of add some separation, because I can separate different areas of the body even if they're the same tone. Like for example, if I use like a middle gray 5 wash, I can build up to a middle gray 5 with this scratchy texture, and they'll still look different from each other because the scratchy texture, you know, it's grainy, it has some white in it. It looks different. They separate from each other, so it's been really great, and it's been a cool way to add shading. I'm adding some to the face. I think that it gives a lot of dimension and impact to the face, so I really like adding it, like around the eyes, and then on little shadow areas, like the center of the face, there's kind of a crease. And then the last thing I'm doing with it is that I'm going over the tail, and I've just got like the bare minimum amount of ink on the brush, just enough to get like the faintest little bit of scratchy texture, and I'm using that to build up the look of the fur on the tail, because there's like a really thin coat of black hairs on the outside of foxes' tails a lot of the time. So it's a fun way to kind of get that effect of just the ends of the fur having the black. I'm coming over the paws again with a wash to combine with the scratchy texture in order to get them as black as I want them, and then I'm adding some final wash details to the face, just adding some extra dimension. I'm coming back in with my fine liner again. This is also the 0.2, and I'm drawing in those little magic raindrops that I've been adding to a lot of my Inktober's that just kind of signify magic, and they also kind of look like dew, so I really like adding them. I think they look like dew or fireflies or stars, depending on the context, and kind of look like all three, so I think it's been a fun touch. And then I'm using the same pen to do the whiskers. The next thing I'm doing is adding in my whites. So I have the Bleed Proof White by Dr. Martens, and I'm coming in with this really tiny 0 size brush, and I'm using just the very finest point to add some specular highlights to the nose and eyes. I've found that the brush is usually best for doing really fine details, because I haven't found a pen that can get as fine of details as I can get with a little brush. And the ink, the Bleed Proof White ink, is really pigmented, and you can also water it down. Like, I'm using it on the forehead there, and I've watered it down a little bit so that it won't be pure white, so I really like the versatility of that. I'm doing some highlights on the paws too. I really like doing white highlights on top of areas that I've made really dark. I think it has a really cool effect, and it comes out a little bit of a cooler gray than the washes, which I think gives some really interesting vibrance to the piece and some color variation, and something that is, you know, mostly entirely gray, just warm grays versus cool grays. So now I'm coming in with the Uni-ball Signo pen to do little stars and more of those little magic balls. And this is another effect that I've been adding to a lot of my Inktobers, and I just really like how it looks. I think it looks really magical, and it looks like dew and fairy dust. So the pen is perfect for that. It lasts a really long time too. I've been using it for a while. So that's the end of this piece. I really enjoyed making this. I hope that you guys liked watching it, and I definitely want to record some more of these before Inktober is over. And now that I actually have a camera that's really easy to use, I plan on making a lot more art videos. I actually could forget about filming like 90% of the time. The only time I was really thinking about it was when I was changing the camera position. It was super easy. So I totally want to integrate this into like my morning drawing routine and film some like sketchbook tours and other stuff for you guys. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know, and let me know if you have any ideas for other stuff that you want to see Inktober wise. Thanks for watching.